In the morning, shoppers, welcome to today's news and guidance show for Monday, December 15, 2025. Coming at you live from a block freeway on-ramp, I'm Fidges Tafis, and we are ready to cut through this incredible stack of sources you provided.
Good morning, I'm Matter, and yeah, what a stack. Our listener has handed us a truly fascinating, if a little chaotic selection of events to synthesize today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our mission today is clear. We are deep diving into this intersection of chaos and code. We have everything here. I mean, from the granular, almost absurd LA parking disputes to, global state-sponsored zero-day exploits that are shaking the very foundation of the internet.
Right.
So we need to extract the most critical insights and do it quickly and thoroughly so you walk away today not just having heard the news, but really understanding why it all matters.
Exactly. And this deep dive, it's built on the value you find here. So just a quick reminder, this show is a value for value program. If you find the synthesis and insights valuable, please zap the show. You can use a podcasting 2.0 app like Fountain. That direct support, it really allows us to keep analyzing this complex information.
And speaking of value, you need to mark your calendars.
Yeah.
Our next Bullish Market event is coming up fast. It's Sunday, December 21st. We have been working overtime on this, and we already have so much lined up: live music, some exciting auctions, and honestly, Emmy-winning new vendors bringing fantastic, innovative products.
It's going to be a big one.
It really is. So make sure you are using the hashtag Bullish Market across social media to see what is in store.
It promises to be a great way to close out the year.
Okay, let's stop traffic and dig into our starting point, the local spotlight on Los Angeles. This section is just this tight, intense snapshot of legal dramas, major infrastructure questions, and some surprising community action happening right here in California. This is where we see local policy and political power get really tested.
It is. And the political and legal hurdles detailed in your sources, they just jump right out. The lead story here is the judge's sharp rebuke. It was delivered when blocking the National Guard deployment, which had been requested by former President Trump in Los Angeles.
Okay, so when a source uses a phrase like sharp rebuke, especially from the judiciary aimed at the executive branch, that signifies a major constitutional confrontation. Where I'm not talking about some minor legal technicality. This is the judicial branch actively enforcing the boundaries of executive power over, state assets.
That's the key. And the context here is fascinating. The National Guard, it usually operates under state control led by the governor, unless it's federalized under very specific conditions. You're talking about the Insurrection Act or other specific authorities. Yeah. So for a judge to step in and block the deployment,
which was presumably for civil unrest or something like that.
Right. It just underscores a serious challenge to federalism. The judge is effectively ruling that the request either lacked the legal prerequisite or it was just a massive overreach of federal authority into state matters.
And that sets a precedent, a dangerous one if it's unchallenged.
Yeah.
But it also reinforces the separation of powers.
It's crucial. It's a real-time example of checks and balances in a really high-stakes, politically charged scenario. It probably references the spirit of the Posse Comitatus Act, which limits using federal military for domestic law enforcement.
Right, and that tension between power and accountability, it just carries right over to local governance, specifically with the LA City Councilman John Lee.
He was found by a judge to have violated gift laws.
Concerning a lavish trip to Vegas.
Right, and this is the kind of story that's easy to just gloss over, but it's critical because it's about institutional norms. Gift laws exist to prevent the appearance, or, the reality, of quid pro quo corruption. A lavish trip suggests someone else, a lobbyist, a developer, some special interest paid for access and potential influence.
So it's not just about the money for the trip.
No, it's about the underlying breach of fiduciary duty. Public trust is a finite resource. And every time a public official is found to have violated these laws, even if the penalty seems minor, it erodes the public's confidence.
Confidence that their leaders are acting in the public interest and not just for personal gain or for their donor.
Exactly. This is why local governance accountability, even for what seems like small infractions, has to be taken so seriously.
I agree completely. Accountability is never minor. Okay, let's shift from the courtroom to the road and the environment. Let's focus on infrastructure and adaptation. The sources note that LA traffic congestion is improving, but then they throw in this curveball, characterizing the trend as not entirely a good thing. That sounds contradictory. Break that down for us.
Yeah, It does, but this raises a critical economic indicator. Historically, traffic congestion in LA has correlated with economic vitality. Fewer people traveling usually means fewer commuters, fewer commercial deliveries, and just less economic activity overall.
So the decline in traffic forces us to ask some tough questions.
Right. Is this purely a positive thing? The result of successful, widespread remote work adoption, which would mean the economy is operating efficiently with a better quality of life for workers?
Sure.
Or is it a sign of economic malaise, where high costs, regulatory burdens, or slow job growth are forcing businesses to shrink, or maybe driving high-income earners and major employers out of the county entirely?
It's the ultimate double-edged sword. A successful work-from-home policy is a win, but if the sources are flagging it as not entirely a good thing, they're likely pointing to the latter. A potential contraction in commercial real estate, reduced city tax revenue from fewer sales, shrinking population growth, all of that.
That tension sets the stage for environmental adaptation, specifically fire safety. An investigation, and this is critical, it was backed by insurance companies.
Oh, that's important.
It is. It found that early adopters of the Zone Zero concept fared significantly better in LA County fires.
Zone Zero. This is a concept we need to get immediately. It's that immediate area around a structure, right? The 0 to 5 foot ring closest to the house.
Exactly. It must be absolutely non-combustible. This means removing all wood mulch, all flammable plants, anything that can act as kindling right up against the structure. You're talking gravel, concrete, or stone.
And the fact that insurance companies aren't just commenting on this, but are actively backing the investigation, that's the key insight here.
Insurers operate on risk modeling and financial liability, so if they can definitively prove that Zone Zero adoption reduces major loss events, they are going to incentivize it.
And eventually, they'll mandate it through policy.
For sure. This is moving the concept from just a good suggestion to an economic imperative. We should expect to see this impact underwriting, premium costs, and maybe even new building codes across all fire-prone regions.
A direct, powerful connection between informed, physical preparation, and financial relief.
Speaking of California policy, you noted that Diablo Canyon, the state's last nuclear plant, cleared a major hurdle allowing it to power on. This is a monumental detail in California's energy future. For years, the policy was all about a phased shutdown of Diablo Canyon. But California faces immense pressure to maintain grid stability while pursuing these aggressive renewable mandates.
And solar and wind are inherently intermittent.
Right, so Diablo Canyon provides massive, reliable baseline power 24/7. Clearing this hurdle reflects a huge pivot in policy, a realization that reliable, carbon-free nuclear power is absolutely necessary to stabilize the grid and prevent blackouts.
Even if it contradicts that previous political impulse to phase it out.
Exactly.
But wait, aren't the sources also clear that delaying the shutdown sends a pretty terrible international message about California's climate commitments, especially since the state has been so vocal about its aggressive renewable timeline? Is this really a stabilizing factor, or is it just kicking the policy can down the road, hoping some tech solution for massive, cheap energy storage emerges before the next political cycle?
It's definitely a policy compromise, not a permanent solution. But it is pragmatic stabilization. The sources suggest the immediate need for reliable power just outweighed the PR concern.
The cost of blackouts, both economic and political, is just too high.
It is. This pause and the decision to continue operation, it buys the state valuable time, likely years, to figure out how to bridge that energy storage gap without sacrificing economic output.
Understood. Okay, let's pivot hard to the truly quirky side of LA, because our stack had some real gems of the human experience. Disneyland, of course. Guests reported waits of up to 11 hours just for a gingerbread cookie. 11 hours. That is a full workday spent waiting for a dessert.
It speaks volumes about consumer psychology and scarcity marketing. 11 hours is an irrational time investment for a cookie. It transforms the item from a simple treat into a status symbol, right? A trophy that validates the time you spent. It's a masterclass in driving demand through manufactured extreme scarcity.
And a testament to the dedication of people seeking a very specific nostalgic experience.
Yeah.
It is. But that moment of levity contrasts really sharply with another quirky yet socially significant detail. The Cone King of LA. This is a story about the battle for public space.
The Cone King, Joey Morales, he's a vigilante of the public domain. His actions removing 5,000 illegal cones used by residents to reserve public parking spots are driven by this fundamental philosophical argument that public parking does not belong to residents simply because it is in front of their home.
This is a perfect, actionable illustration of the tragedy of the commons. Public parking is a shared resource. But when residents decide their private need outweighs the public good, they use these simple markers, cones, buckets, whatever, to privatize that space.
And Morales is forcing the community to confront the law and the ethics of that privatization. His movement reflects a deep frustration with urban congestion and the self-serving actions that make resource scarcity even worse in dense cities.
It's such an important insight into urban tension. And that conflict over public versus private, it transitions us, unfortunately, to some very disturbing local crimes mentioned in the sources.
We have the investigation into a young musician gunned down in Northridge with the suspicion that childhood friends may have set her up. And then the leaders of that secretive California religious group, His Way Spirit, accused of murder after 2 members disappeared.
Those are incredibly heavy threads woven into the social fabric, and they remind us that security isn't just digital or economic. It's deeply personal, relational. The Northridge case is about a tragic breakdown of personal trust, a profound betrayal. The His Way Spirit case speaks to the dangers of isolation and unchecked power within secretive groups.
Yeah, where the boundaries of law and decency just fail. These ongoing investigations highlight some serious breakdowns in trust and safety within the region.
And finally, we saw a national political figure intersecting with this local context, the Kristi Noem congressional hearing.
Right. She was grilled regarding an LA Purple Heart Army veteran who self-deported to South Korea.
This case is just heartbreaking, and it reveals systemic failures in immigration and veteran policy. For an Army veteran, someone wounded defending this country who earned a Purple Heart, to feel they have to self-deport, it means the system of supporting non-citizen service members and longtime residents has just failed catastrophically.
It has. The sources suggest the veteran likely faced these complex, insurmountable legal hurdles related to naturalization or visa status or maybe criminal history that just outweighed the benefits he earned through his service.
So the hearing, by focusing on this specific LA tragedy, elevates the issue.
It does. It reveals the pressure on state and federal politicians like Noam to address the backlog and the lack of compassion in handling these complex immigration cases involving military personnel. It forces a public debate on what value we actually place on service.
And who is truly owed the protections and status of citizenship.
Exactly.
Wow, that was an intense local snapshot. Okay, let's zoom out dramatically. Moving from the micro focus of LA to the broader macro trends impacting consumers and security globally.
We shift immediately to the economic shockwaves hitting consumer wallets in major industries. Let's start with the ACA sticker shock. The high costs facing consumers shopping for Affordable Care Act plans, coupled with stalled legislation in Congress. That's a major headline.
Okay, so what specific legislative fixes are stalled, and how does that connect to the rising costs? Is the problem the premiums, or is it the soaring deductibles that make the insurance basically unusable for routine care?
The sources indicate the sticker shock is multifaceted. It's hitting both premiums and deductibles. The stalled legislation likely involves a permanent extension of those enhanced pandemic-era subsidies.
Or a public option?
Or proposals for a public option, right, aimed at increasing competition. Without these fixes, especially the subsidy extensions, middle-income earners who don't qualify for Medicaid but also don't get employer coverage, they are seeing their net costs just skyrocket.
So it tells us that while the ACA got wide coverage, the political will to address true systemic affordability is just absent.
It is, leaving millions in financial limbo.
A clear indicator of policy paralysis and direct impact on your finances. But maybe even more fascinating from an industry perspective is the Ford F-150 Lightning discontinuation. Ford announced they are stopping production of the all-electric F-150 Lightning pickup truck.
This is a massive economic reality check. The F-150 is the backbone of Ford's profitability. Discontinuing the EV version is a potent signal that the predicted demand curve for expensive electric pickups has just collapsed. And we have to look beyond just a simple lack of interest. The sources suggest a combination of things: high interest rates impacting expensive truck loans, fluctuating battery material costs, nickel, lithium, and crucially consumer anxiety about charging infrastructure and towing capacity.
So it's not just a rejection of EVs, it's a rejection of the electric version of a highly demanding vehicle at these price points. I would challenge the idea that this is a total EV failure. Isn't it just a clear sign that Ford realizes it needs its profitable gas division to keep funding the massive, costly infrastructure needed for the EV transition? It seems like a necessary pause, not a surrender.
That's a much more nuanced take, and I agree the sources support it. This move suggests Ford is optimizing its capital. They're shifting production resources back to high-margin gasoline models to maintain financial stability. The F-150 Lightning requires huge, expensive battery packs, making the production costs exceptionally sensitive to commodity prices. This decision confirms that incentives and mandates alone aren't enough.
The economics of manufacturing, infrastructure, and consumer willingness, they all have to align. And they're just not aligning for large, costly EVs right now.
Not right now.
A critical industry reassessment.
No.
Okay, shifting dramatically from economics to security and social violence, our sources highlighted intense legislative action in Australia. They swiftly enacted strict new gun laws following a rise in anti-Semitic incidents and a deadly attack at Bondi Beach.
Australia's response is characterized by a speed and severity that's rooted in their national memory of previous mass shootings, specifically the 1996 Port Arthur massacre, which led to the National Firearms Agreement. So following the recent anti-Semitic incidents which raised social tension, the Bondi Beach attack served as the immediate catalyst.
The new laws are likely focused on mandatory buybacks, increased licensing restrictions, that kind of thing.
That's right. And potentially federal funding for strict enforcement, targeting specific types of semi-automatic weapons or certain high-capacity firearms.
What's fascinating here is the immediate political will to legislate so quickly. And then you contrast that with the story the sources also provided of the bystander hero who disarmed the gunman in Sydney.
That juxtaposition is really important for framing the narrative. On one hand, the political machine uses the tragedy to justify centralized, sweeping legal changes. On the other, the bystander hero provides this powerful counter-narrative of individual courage and community resilience, showing that security and safety ultimately rely on both policy and spontaneous individual action in a crisis.
Moving back stateside, we observed a significant, sobering shift in criminal justice trends. The dramatic rise in executions in 2025, which nearly doubled, driven specifically by Florida.
This is a clear reversal of a multi-decade trend in many states toward reducing capital punishment. Florida, by driving this rise, is signaling a distinct and potentially permanent change in its approach to criminal sentencing. It's likely tied to specific policy changes, maybe related to the governor's role in issuing death warrants or changes to jury requirements for capital sentencing.
A crucial indicator for anyone tracking criminal justice policy.
Sure.
And we have to address another sensitive but important piece of information from the source stack, the new images from the Epstein estate. They're revealing powerful men in politics and media.
Right. And we have to strictly report the factual content provided. That new images were revealed from the estate, and they feature powerful men in politics and media. The consistent flow of information related to the estate continues to have massive systemic implications. The fact that the sources still yield high-profile names demonstrates the deep, pervasive network of influence that the investigation is still uncovering.
Which forces ongoing questions about accountability across powerful sectors.
Absolutely.
We also had a set of notes regarding culture and loss, specifically surrounding the death of Rob Reiner, an important cultural figure known for making movies for people who love them.
His passing is a moment of cultural reflection. However, the source material forces a more complicated view by simultaneously mentioning that his son, Nick Reiner, was arrested. The private difficulties juxtaposed with the public legacy illustrate that often stark contrast in the lives of public figures.
And to complicate the narrative even further, we have the note that former President Trump posted that Rob Reiner had Trump derangement syndrome following his death.
This just exemplifies the current, highly polarized information climate. Even a moment of mourning for a cultural icon becomes immediately politicized and weaponized to score ideological points. It shows the extent to which political identity, for many in public life, overrides traditional boundaries of respect or shared cultural appreciation. It turns every news moment into a point of partisan conflict.
Finally, let's briefly cover the updates on a couple of unresolved and resolved cases that closed out this segment.
The victims of the Brown University shooting were identified, allowing the community to begin mourning, though with the gunman remaining at large, the immediate threat and stress persist. Conversely, the case of Brian Walsh was resolved, with his conviction for the murder of his wife. These two notes just remind us of the continuous cycle of unresolved tragedy and the eventual, though painful, closure brought by the justice system.
A truly intense segment. Okay, let's make a thematic link here. That battle over public versus private use and the failure of physical boundaries, it translates perfectly to the digital world of the zero-day exploit, where boundaries are constantly being redrawn. We are shifting focus entirely now into the overwhelming, accelerating rate of digital vulnerabilities, the digital minefield. This is perhaps the most critical section for you today.
Absolutely. We have multiple high-severity zero-day exploits detailed in the sources, starting with React2 shell, which is CVE 2025-55182. This is an emergency of the highest order because it involves critical remote code execution.
Okay, let's break down the severity of RCE. Remote code execution means an attacker can run any code they want, right? Install malware, steal data, take over the system all remotely.
Exactly. And the source material points out that this is actively being exploited by China-linked threat actors. That suggests a sophisticated state-level actor is involved in mass-scale cyber espionage or sabotage.
And the scale confirms that suspicion.
It does. The sources detail over 77,000 internet-exposed IP addresses are vulnerable globally. We are talking about web servers, email systems, critical VPN gateways that form the infrastructure backbone of thousands of organizations. The response was so massive, the source noted the emergency patching effort itself caused a Cloudflare outage.
Wait, hold on. The fix caused a cascading failure across a major internet provider.
It did. I mean, imagine the administrative burden of 77,000 servers needing rapid global updates, often involving kernel changes or massive configuration steps. That immense synchronized global traffic spike, combined with complex networking changes, it puts overwhelming stress on backbone providers like Cloudflare, leading to a temporary but significant disruption.
So it highlights the systemic risk. The cost of simply responding to a major zero-day is economically crippling, regardless of whether the attack succeeds. And React2 shell is just one front. Apple also released updates to fix 2 zero-day vulnerabilities, but the source qualified these as being exploited in extremely sophisticated attacks that were targeting specific individuals. What defines this extreme sophistication compared to the 77,000 target broad attack?
That distinction is vital. React2 shell is about volume. The Apple zero days, often purchased on the black market for millions, are reserved for high-value targets. Sophistication here means the exploit chain is custom designed, often involving zero-click attacks, where the victim doesn't even have to interact with a malicious link.
So the device is compromised just by receiving a specially crafted message or something?
Exactly. These are typically deployed by mercenary spyware firms like NSO Group or nation-states targeting journalists, dissidents, or high-ranking government officials. It's surgical warfare, not mass phishing.
And Google had to issue its own emergency update for an actively exploited Chrome zero day, which marks the 8th such fix in 2025. 8 zero days in a single browser in 1 year is.
That's alarming. It signals the accelerating pace of vulnerability disclosure and exploitation in critical client-side infrastructure, the web browser. Chrome, running on complex engines like V8, is constantly processing untrusted code. Attackers are clearly getting better at finding subtle flaws in the security sandbox that's supposed to isolate the browser from the OS.
The implication is severe. The time between a flaw being found and being actively weaponized is shrinking, demanding users and IT departments be in a near-constant state of emergency patching.
Right, and this accelerating vulnerability curve, it applies not just to operating systems and browsers, but also to data storage and institutional failures, which we saw in the major data breaches in our sources.
Yeah, the Kupang breach, exposing 33.7 million customers, had a very specific and preventable failure point. A former employee who retained access to internal systems.
The perennial insider threat. We focus so much on building external firewalls that we often overlook the basic procedural requirement of offboarding.
33 million customer records exposed because of a failure in identity access management. Just failing to revoke credentials is a huge wake-up call for any business owner listening.
For sure, the threat comes from within just as often as from sophisticated external actors.
Then we have the U.S. financial services company 700 Credit notifying over 5.8 million customers about a data breach.
And given what that company does, the compromised data is highly sensitive PII, likely including credit information, social security numbers, all the data crucial for identity theft and fraud. The scale alone ensures this breach will have massive, long-tail consequences for everyone affected.
Now, here is a breach that highlights the danger of supply chain attacks in a really dramatic way. Cornhub is facing extortion demands from the Shiny Hunters gang after data from premium members, specifically search and watch history, was stolen during a Mixpanel breach.
This is the perfect contemporary case study of the supply chain attack vector. Pornhub was using Mixpanel, which is a behavioral analytics tool, to understand user engagement, pathways, what people are doing on their site. The attackers compromised Mixpanel, which then gave them the pathway to extract extremely specific, granular behavioral data belonging to Pornhub's premium users.
And clarifying that mixed panel is a behavioral analytics tool is essential. The theft wasn't just contact info. It was the specific granular history, the core of a person's digital behavior that Mixpanel aggregates. This data is catastrophic. It moves the consequence beyond financial loss and into the realm of severe personal and professional blackmail.
Which makes the extortion demands exponentially more effective. Every company has to realize its security posture is only as strong as its weakest vendor.
Absolutely.
We also saw the compromise of the self-hosted Git service GOGs, where a previously unpatched zero-day flaw allowed hackers to get remote code execution, compromising 700 servers. For developers, compromising a Git repository is the ultimate prize. It contains source code, intellectual property, internal configs, often hard-coded credentials. It's a direct theft of the company's core assets.
And tying this back to the evolution of cybercrime, Japanese e-commerce giant Askel confirmed that ransom house hackers stole about 740,000 customer records in an October ransomware attack.
This confirms the dominance of the double extortion model. They encrypt your systems, and they steal your data.
So if you won't pay the ransom to decrypt, you face a second demand to prevent the stolen customer records from being publicly leaked.
Exactly. The pressure on these institutions is immense, and our sources highlight the role of regulatory accountability. The UK Information Commissioner's Office fined LastPass £1.2 million for failing to implement security measures that could have prevented a 2022 breach affecting up to 1.6 million UK users.
Okay, this is crucial, but is a £1.2 million fine enough of a deterrent for a massive, globally recognized security firm? The cost of the breach itself, the reputation loss, the remediation, surely it dwarfs that amount.
That's a critical point. While the fine might seem small relative to the breach cost, these regulatory fines serve a vital function beyond just cost recovery. They publicly assign legal blame for negligence. The ICO found that LastPass failed to implement basic fundamental security hygiene likely related to weak key management or MFA failures. This fine is a signal to the entire industry that failure to meet a minimum standard will result in tangible regulatory financial consequences.
Forcing boards to prioritize security spending.
Hopefully.
And to cap off the security segment, we have to introduce the newest threat in the malware-as-a-service landscape, SanaStealer. It's a new Moz info stealer advertised to steal data from browsers and crypto wallets.
I appreciate the dark humor of the festive name. But the key technical feature the listener needs to grasp is that SanaStealer operates solely in memory to evade detection. This represents a significant jump in sophistication.
Okay, explain that practical impact. If it lives only in memory, how does that bypass traditional security?
Traditional antivirus and even older endpoint detection and response, or EDR, tools, they rely heavily on scanning the hard drive or the file system for known signatures or suspicious files. SanaStealer is fileless. It executes entirely in the volatile memory of the computer without writing any persistent file to the disk. Once its task is done, the memory space is cleared, leaving virtually no trace for file system scanners to find.
So it forces security firms to completely overhaul their defensive strategies.
It does. Shifting from signature scanning to continuous memory forensics and behavioral analysis, monitoring processes, not just files. If security teams are slothful in this transition, fileless malware like SanaStealer will sail right past their defenses.
That is terrifyingly efficient. And a great bridge. Let's pull back from the immediate digital minefield and shift our focus entirely to the future pipeline. What are the technologists and developers currently talking about and building? What were the Hacker News top headlines predicting for the next wave of disruption?
We move from the current chaos to the future. And the biggest discussion revolves around the economic impact of AI, specifically the headline that AI agents are beginning to disrupt and potentially replace traditional software as a service, or SaaS, business models. That's a profound statement about economic restructuring.
Okay, let's dig into that disruption model. SaaS is the default business model for modern software. You pay Salesforce for CRM, you pay Zoom for communication. How does an AI agent replace an entire hosted service that took years to build?
An AI agent fundamentally shifts the utility. SaaS provides the platform for you to perform a task. An AI agent is designed to execute the goal autonomously. So instead of subscribing to multiple platforms for scheduling, invoicing, inventory, you would pay a sophisticated AI agent to handle the entire operations pipeline. The agent can synthesize and interact with APIs across different systems without a human needing to manually input data into different SaaS dashboards.
So the AI agent becomes the centralized, self-governing entity that replaces the need for the human user to interface with a dozen different subscription-based tools.
Exactly. Intelligent automation moves beyond being just a feature inside a SaaS product to becoming a direct replacement for the entire product itself. If the agent can be customized, run cheaply, and is superior to paying monthly for 10 different pieces of limited software.
The SaaS revenue model faces a catastrophic challenge.
Right, and that leads directly into the critical societal debate highlighted in the sources. The discussion questioning whether AI systems should pay taxes if they replace human workers.
This is the policy corollary to the economic disruption. If AI agents automate away massive swaths of human labor, the income tax base, the primary revenue source for many governments, it erodes. So, what specific mechanisms are being debated for taxing this automation?
Policy thinkers are exploring various methods. Proposals include levying taxes on AI transactions, implementing data utilization taxes, or imposing a form of robotic labor tax, where a company pays a tax equivalent to the income tax a human worker would have paid. The sources suggest this is a critical discussion because if governments fail to tax automation effectively, they face massive budget shortfalls, just as the demand for social safety nets needed to support displaced workers skyrockets.
The political implication is enormous, absolutely vital. Okay, moving to hardware and open source conflicts, our sources highlighted the fate of the Roomba. The maker filed for bankruptcy and was subsequently acquired by a Chinese owner.
This is the classic life cycle of innovation meeting the marketplace. Roomba was a pioneer, but maintaining a lead in consumer robotics requires immense, unsustainable R&D and aggressive pricing, leading to razor-thin margins. The acquisition is significant because it transfers ownership of key robotics IP and, crucially, the vast amount of highly sensitive mapping data from customer homes to an international owner.
Which raises new questions about data sovereignty and competitive national interests.
For sure.
And then we have this specific ideological friction in the developer community. Adafruit publicly stated that Arduino's rules are incompatible with open source principles.
This is a deep philosophical rift within the maker and open source hardware community. Arduino and Adafruit are major pillars of this ecosystem. Adafruit's public criticism suggests that they feel Arduino, in its efforts to commercialize and protect its ecosystem, has implemented rules, maybe licensing restrictions or requirements for commercial distribution, that violate the core ethos of open source.
Which is the free and unrestricted ability to use, study, copy, modify, and redistribute the work.
Exactly. This disagreement signals a potential fracture in the community between purely ideological openness and necessary commercial sustainability.
That battle over the soul of the hardware movement is essential context. Let's get even more technical now, because the sources contain specific developer insights, like the advice recommending developers avoid using version 4 UEID primary keys in PostgreSQL. This sounds extremely niche, but why does this decision matter to the listener, who might be a business owner or a project manager?
This is a perfect example of how subtle technical engineering decisions can have catastrophic performance impacts down the line, affecting the user experience for millions. Version 4 UEBNs, or universally unique identifiers, they're generated randomly. When you use a random value as a primary key in a massive database like PostgreSQL, you destroy index locality.
Okay, walk us through what index locality means in simple terms.
Databases are fast because they try to write and retrieve related data physically close together on the disk. That's locality. If you insert a random v4 UID key, the database has to jump all over the hard drive to find the next available spot to write the data and update the index. This constant jumping causes excessive disk seeks and cache misses. As the database scales to millions of records, that random insertion pattern leads to severe index fragmentation and drastically slows down read and write times.
So the solution is using sequential IDs or special time-ordered UIDs, like V7, that maintain this locality and ensure performance scales. Bad keys mean slow, expensive websites and applications.
That's the bottom line.
Got it. We also saw a mention of the Arboretum tool for code highlighting using Tree Sitter, which supports both native and WebAssembly, or WASM, targets.
This connects to important modern development frameworks. Tree Sitter is a high-performance parsing library. It's much faster and more resilient than older methods. And WebAssembly, or WASM, is the technology that lets compiled code, often from languages like C++ or Rust, run at near-native speeds inside a web browser.
So Arboretum, supporting both native and WASM targets, signals a strong movement toward unified, high-performance developer tooling.
Right, ensuring that the same sophisticated code analysis can happen instantly on the desktop, and seamlessly in a web-based IDE.
And speaking of the web and boundaries, SoundCloud implemented measures to block users attempting to access the service via virtual private networks, or VPNs.
This highlights the ongoing cat-and-mouse game between content platforms and users seeking privacy or geographical workarounds.
So why is SoundCloud doing this?
It's purely driven by legal and licensing requirements. Content platforms like SoundCloud have strict contractual obligations with music labels and rights holders to enforce geographical restrictions, often tied to royalty payments and market availability. When users circumvent these region locks using VPNs, the platform is in breach of contract, so they have to invest in sophisticated detection algorithms to identify and block common VPN providers in a continuous, expensive effort to defend their licensing boundaries.
Hmm. And finally, the sources included some general, fascinating developer discussions, like the internal discussion prompt, Ask HN, what are you working on? The technical announcement, Unsci, and the story about the Top Gun NES carrier landing sequence.
These are great texture. They show the intellectual diversity of the community. Ask HN, what are you working on? Is the pulse of grassroots innovation. Unsci likely refers to a specialized character set or encoding solution, appealing to that deep niche technical interest in how information is represented. And the Top Gun NES story analyzing the notoriously difficult carrier landing sequence that demonstrates the community's love for combining nostalgia with detailed technical reverse engineering.
That was a tremendous dive. We covered three massive disparate areas, local governance, global economics, and digital infrastructure, in extensive detail.
And the ultimate synthesis is a complex one. It connects the economic volatility with the security challenges. Our sources show a world grappling with a failure to scale amidst rapid innovation and aggressive demands. The F-150 Lightning failed to scale economically because the battery technology and infrastructure couldn't keep pace with market expectations. React-2 Shell and the massive wave of 0 days show digital infrastructure failing to scale to meet the speed and sophistication of modern threats.
That's a much deeper insight than just boundaries. It's about systemic fragility. Whether it's the lack of stability in the power grid that forces Diablo Canyon back online, or the inability of security protocols to prevent fileless malware like SantaStealer, we are seeing systems buckling under accelerating pressure.
Exactly. The systems, economic, legal, and digital, are struggling to cope with the speed of change and the aggressive demands placed upon them.
That systemic fragility makes our proverb of the day particularly relevant. Today's proverb is, "The way of the slothful man is as an hedge of thorns, but the way of the righteous is made plain."
That resonates deeply with the security and infrastructure segments. The slothful organization that procrastinates on patching, defers maintenance on their IAM systems, or fails to transition their defenses away from file-based scanning, they create a self-inflicted chaos. A painful hedge of thorns they must then struggle through, often resulting in breaches like Kupang or the agony of the React-2 shell response.
But the way of the righteous, the informed listener who understands the technical details of ordered UUIDs versus random ones, the complex economics behind the F-150 discontinuation, and the threat of memory-only malware is made plain. They see the landscape clearly because they are prepared and diligent.
Couldn't have said it better. And for our clip of the day, what story captured the perfect blend of absurdity and deep social insight?
Oh, it has to be the Cone King of LA, Joey Morales. That small daily battle over a public parking spot is a highly relatable, entertaining, and perfect encapsulation of the larger global fight over resources, rules, and the erosion of the public domain that defines our world today.
An excellent choice to highlight that microcosm of conflict. We encourage you to continue exploring the sources that informed this deep dive.
Adios, humans.